We'll turn the old microphone on there, eh? All right, dude. What's up, guys? It's Friday night. Kids are in bed. I spent the week perusing through and going through the Land and Sea books with a fine-tooth comb, trying to spot any details of ASHUR rigs and any lore or tidbits therein. And I got through the first 4 books. I'm on book 5 right now. I didn't get through all of them, but I got a pretty good plethora of information, and I'm just going to come on and share it with you guys tonight. So that's what we got to look forward to. Big, stompy robots that I'm going to be talking about. Well, not big. They're not like Gundams and such, you know. So let me get over. I made a little Google Docs sheet where I put in all the info and all the blurbs and passages from the books. And that's kind of gonna be what the night's gonna freaking be like, dude. So let's let you see what I'm talking about. All right. I hope you can see that. All right. So in America, so multiple countries have combat rigs. They have mobile combat suits, whatever you want to call them. In America, they're called ASHURs. And that stands for Augmented, Soft, Hard, Unconventional Combat Rigs. Now, these are all passages that I straight up just copy and pasted out of my the books on my Kindle. Dubbed Iron Man suits. This is talking about the Gen 1s. They were the early generations of augmented battle armor. Only the best of the best were even given the honor of trying to qualify to wear a rig in battle, and then you had to test for each model of suit. His having piloted a rig in combat told her quite a bit about the man beside her. She found herself trying to see if he sported the traditional tattoo on his hand that marked ASHUR pilots. This is a scene from a POV from Natalia Falto's perspective when she first meets Sergeant Rickenberg, call sign Hannibal, in Guam. And you can see there I got, tells you what book it's from, splash down, what page it's on. Dude, it's got it all. Thank you, Kindle, for adding that to copy and paste. That's awesome. Furthermore, the U.S. Army had embraced the concept of powered armor tactical suits in the early 21st century. The earliest models were cumbersome and limited by the power needs. Innovations in fuel cells and battery storage finally made a powered rig feasible. Jeez, dude, I can't even talk. The program, dubbed ASHUR, Augmented, Soft, Hard, Unconventional Combat Rigs, was named after the Assyrian god of war. So yeah, it's a big issue with like before the fish came, and we'll get to it a little bit later, but basically we stole their technology as far as how they power their creations. We incorporated it into our own suits, and that greatly increased the efficiency. It made the rigs lighter. The batteries were lighter, but they lasted way longer. They could power more things. Once we stole the alien tech or reverse engineered it. So yeah, but before that, like the Gen 1s, Gen 2s, they had huge batteries that weren't very efficient. That was like the huge limiting factor for the mechs. And then once that new tech came out, they added that into the Gen 3s, and they even retrofitted some of the Gen 2s. They started retrofitting Gen 2s that were still, actively deployed, and retrofitted later on in book 7. 7? Yeah, 7. Cyclones of Chaos, they retrofit some Gen 1 Eagles. And think about this too, as I was going through and like skimming through the book and through the chapters, if there's a chapter that I was like, obviously I knew there wasn't going to be any talk of ASHURs, I would just jump to the next one. But like you get one chapter where you get like a whole list of rig models, and then you'll be going down later, and all of a sudden, like bam, another one pops up. So I had to and it might not even be in a chapter where like it wasn't like a pilot. It was just like someone out in the battlefield and they came across an ASHUR, and then sometimes there wouldn't be any description. It would just be like there was a croc rig or whatever rig. And sometimes there would be extra descriptions. And in that case, I would try and grab the details and put it in there. So I'm hoping that it's pretty comprehensive. I'm hoping that I didn't miss anything, because I was, not trying to spend a buttload of time on it. But even so, I still was being like semi-thorough. So, you know, we'll see. We'll see. I'll squirt it to the Discord and see if the person running the wiki likes what I did here. But anyway, yeah. So, first, battery designs were not great and cumbersome and inefficient. Anyway, continuing on. To even qualify for ASHUR, you had to be in the top 10% of your MOS, which is military occupational specialty, and have been certified as a marksman with at least 2 heavy weapons. The soldiers who wore them were the best of the best. Men and women who underwent a rigorous evaluation and training program that washed out 75% of those who enrolled. Graduating the program wasn't the end. Pilots were trained in every suit, but were tested and matched to the suit that best fit their skills, psychological profile, and capabilities. Soldiers had to recertify for the program and qualify individually for each suit. Pilots often wore patches on their sleeves for each rig they were rated to pilot. It was a badge of honor to be selected to wear an ASHUR in battle. Yeah, so even just being like, well, one, being just qualified on a rig in general is prestigious, like fighter pilot, you're a badass, you're cool. But then, like, if you're dual qualified or however many more rigs you get qualified on, it just makes you that much more of a badass. And Adam Kane, Master Sergeant Adam Kane of the U.S. Army, is qualified on 4 different rigs. One from, or not one from each, but 2 Gen 1s, I want to say. Eagle, I don't remember what the other Gen 1 is. And then the Rhino for the Gen 2, and then the Grizzly for the Gen 3. Yeah, and then ASHUR pilots had to be nominated by a superior officer and had to maintain the highest of performance ratings. So when the Gen 3s first rolled out, Adam Kane was recommended by Colonel Davis, call sign Harpoon, I don't remember his first name. It's down lower, but I'm not going to go down there right this second. But anyway, he was nominated because they both fought together defending the Pentagon from the fish. And the colonel tried to put Adam in for the Medal of Honor. And Kane was just like, no, I'm not about that life. But regardless, the colonel was very impressed with Kane and wanted to see him be one of the first few batches of soldiers coming through to qualify on the Gen 3 ASHUR. So Kane was real early on, got qualified on the Grizzly. And because of that, he was sent to a battle in Michigan, which was basically like our first real victory. Like, we've had other victories, but like we lost so many people and we're so got our asses handed to us so bad that they weren't really victories. Like, they were very costly victories. But this was one where Ashton Slade had kind of put together enough pieces where he was able to anticipate the aliens' moves and sent Adam Kane with his sweet Gen 3 Grizzly. And there was a Mamba? Mustang? I don't remember. Anyway, there's a couple other rigs there and, other fighter vehicles and stuff like that at the Michigan. It was like a power plant. It was like some key like logistic or infrastructure type facility that the aliens wanted to target and destroy. And so they basically turned that into like a little fort. Adam was there with his Gen 3 Grizzly, and they did such a good job kicking the aliens' ass that they were like kind of surprised when the fighting stopped, and they thought there was going to be like they were hiding. There was a surprise attack coming, and they're like, no, actually, you guys just killed everybody. So that was like, at least in America, that was America's first solid victory. And a lot of Storm Surge. There's another one, Storm Surge, where they have the Trident rigs, the underwater rigs, and the new like combat like fighter subs that were used, and that also led to a very decisive victory for humanity. So Book 3 kind of ends kind of hopeful, which, I mean, no spoilers, but don't hold out too much hope. But anyway, yeah, Book 3 is a good one. I really like Storm Surge. Anyway, the augmented hydraulic systems made the ASHUR pilots more like walking tanks than armored infantry. They called themselves pilots rather than drivers because they were more like ground-based fighter pilots. Yeah, that's the thing too. They don't call them drivers. It's just a little flavor, dude. Badassery. It also added an air of glamour to their role in the battlefield. The ASHUR program was credited with helping win the war against the Russians. So that's again like where the back, where I really like the Russo-Bratva lore, like that war lore. And it kind of shapes the geopolitical background to this new conflict with the fish and all the, I don't know, it's very well tied in, and it's very much like a tangible part of the story. Even though that war has ended, there's still veterans from that war who are now fighting in this war. There's policies and like the equipment that kind of sprang up because of that war that's now part of this, and it's evolving to a new stage. So yeah, it's great lore, backstory, whatever you want to call it, world building. ASHUR operators were allowed to put some sort of custom painting on their chest armor plates, much like World War II bombers had crew insignia on the nose of the aircraft. So yeah, each pilot, like, they'll have their own call sign, and then their rig will have a separate name. So like with Adam Kane, for instance, I just use him a lot because he's my favorite. Well, I don't know, the Whoop Ass, which is not an ASHUR crew. They're oh dude, it's some like Schwarpikoff. I don't know. It's a fighter. It's like a tank crew. It's like a driver and a gunner on the Whoop Ass. But anyway, they're like my new favorite. Kane, I don't know. Them and Kane are just duking it out for number one. Anyway, so Kane, his call sign as a pilot is Brass Balls, but the name of his rig is Jumpin' Jewels, and it's basically like an old, I don't know, yeah, World War II style buxom babe lady with like a, you know, like in a red bikini, like straddling I think it's a rail gun from a Rhino, and yes, it says Jumpin' Jewels on it. So it's like real old school looking. That's his setup. Everyone else has got different things. Yeah, it's all unique to the actual pilot and their rig. So let's talk a little bit more about the tattoos that ASHUR pilots get. So Adam could see the Roman numeral 2 tattooed on the back of his right hand. He had the Army mark for ASHUR 2 qualified drivers, which would be Gen 2. He balled his own fist, and the two men tapped their fists twice. It was an unspoken handshake between two seasoned combat vets, both qualified to pilot power armor in battle. So this one it's not really a mech thing. It's just more of like, I don't know, the culture of the pilot. So that's why I wanted to put it in here. But it's from ASHUR school. So he remembered a cadence from training for ASHURs as if it were yesterday. I am my rig. I am my ride. I am the master of all inside. Dude, I love that. That's such a fucking cool cadence. I'm gonna get that tattooed on me. I'm gonna do it. Can't stop me. All right, so we're starting off with the Gen 1 ASHURs. Each was modular to a certain extent and could be outfitted quickly with a number of different weapon systems, offering flexibility. Each consisted of a reinforced spine that supported the armor and weapons, as well as a sophisticated set of hydraulics and neuro-interfaced miniaturized servos and actuators that gave the pilot incredible control and precision in terms of movement. Wearing a fully outfitted rig gave the pilot the ability to not only move faster with no loss of control, but they could lift an incredible amount of weight, and the rigs could be outfitted with a staggering amount of firepower. At the start of the war with Russia, this was what the Army and Marines fielded. So as far as I can tell, as I've skimmed through it, the Gen 1s, you had the Eagle, which that I didn't find that name of that rig until book 7. Mongoose, Badger, Rattlesnake. Those are the only ones that unless I missed some, those are the only ones I've found so far. The Gen 2s, the second generation of tactical suits, emerged as the war dragged on. So these came out while the war with Russia was still going on. Every Marine could identify their distinctive shapes by sight. So a lot of these, they're all named after animals. And a lot of them have some kind of at least the ones that we see descriptions of, have something that kind of resemble the animal they're named after. So you have the hyena, the cobra, the mongoose 2, the mamba. The rig was big, about 8 feet tall. The mamba had smooth, streamlined design. Its left shoulder mounted chain gun had armored ammo feeds to a reserve on the back of the rig. The right arm was ringed with 6 single-shot rockets, and from the colors of their nose tips, everything from HEAP, H-E-A-P, I don't know what that is, to anti-personnel warheads. So yeah, with the mamba, they didn't really, I haven't found a description that really links it to looking like a mamba, but that's the one description I found so far. There's a cougar, the gator. This is all I found for that one. Gators move slower and had a higher center of gravity. I'll tell you. Let me get rid of that. Little guy right there. Badger 2. It's a medium rig. The Ram. They have big heads. I didn't copy that one because it was literally like the Ram's big head, so I figured I would remember that part. So, as you would expect from a Ram, we have big horns. The mech it's named after, or the mech that's named after it, has big head. The Rams were impressive, the right arm mounting a massive 105mm recoilless rifle, the left mounting a Winchester 510 heavy railgun. The Rams were designed for long-range fire support. The Lion assault rig. So the Lion is, it's not the first rig we see, but it's the first ASHUR, as far as I remember. And it's in Guam, piloted by Sergeant Rickenberg. Yeah, that's his rig. I have to go down. I don't remember his call sign or the rig's name. I got it down lower. Anyway, it's an assault rig. The Marine Corps outfitted their rigs differently from the Army, but that was to be expected. ASHUR 1 gear was cruder with less armor and less staying power, but potent firepower. The new rigs allowed relatively rapid mobility and carried the fuel cells and weaponry to hang in a fight longer than their predecessors. The spine of the ASHUR system served as a support for the entire system. The driver, referred to as the pilot, just to irritate Marine and Air Force aviators, stood in the torso of the man-shaped armor, with his or her feet reaching down to the middle of the suit's thighs. It was armored in layers of SDF, carbon weave, and thick ceramic plates, much more rounded and sloping than the Russian Grizzly counterparts. So that's actually, the Grizzly is the first mech we see in the story. That's also piloted by Rickenberg, but as like a training exercise so that the Marines can get some experience fighting against Russian rigs. Its massive flattened feet gave it good firing stability. With modular weapon mounts, its only standard weapon was a M478 Scythe short-barreled chain gun mounted on the right arm. Every other weapon could be rapidly attached, detached, and field configured as needed. Staff Sergeant Rickenberg had mounted 2 shoulder-launched disposable Law 98A rockets designed for anti-tank attacks onto his shoulder racks. The Laws were short, less than 2 feet long, and about 3.5 inches. The acronym traced its roots back to its Vietnam-era counterparts. The light anti-tank weapon rockets were vastly different. Triangular in shape, they had collapsible fins that popped out when they fired, and a deadly shaped charge. Their range was shorter than the conventional Law 98, but if you were close enough to be the target, you could consider yourself DOA. On the rig's right arm, he had rigged a canister-fed rapid-fire M275 grenade launcher, and on the left he had attached a L101 medium laser. The laser was bulky and fired in 2-second bursts. It devoured power, but was devastating against armored targets. So that's the line. That's on the cover of Book 1 of Splashdown. I forgot to put the Storm Surge cover in here because that's the Tiger Shark. I do believe. I don't know 100%, but I'm pretty confident that that's the Tiger Shark on the cover of Storm Surge. It's not in here. It's not that big a deal. You can, look up Storm Surge, whatever. The Rhino. So this is the first rig that we see Adam Kane pilot in. You don't see it in Splashdown, but in Riptides he's in it, and it's. I think it's the first time we are in a POV inside an ASHUR, and yeah, he rocks, and his chapters are so fun to read. The way he fights with his ASHURs, the way he talks and thinks and beats the crap out of fish is nice. Anyway, Rhino. The assault rig was the pinnacle of issued power combat armor in the U.S. arsenal. The Rhino was so named because of its head-mounted L3 laser, which, from the right angle, with some squinting, looked like a horn. His right arm mounted an M2 Remington railgun, which used magnetic pulses to fire a projectile downrange at hypersonic speeds. The railgun's impacts were hard enough to penetrate the armor on many tanks. The left arm was equipped with an externally mounted ACR-30 assault weapon and enough ammunition to chew up 3 enemy platoons. Despite its armor, the Rhino was remarkably agile, with a good hydraulic system that allowed the user a wide range of mobility. Yeah, Riptides. There you go. Here's another one. The unobstructed wide view provided a sense of openness for using his overlay targeting reticle to aim. Unlike the Mamba-class rig, where you look through a relatively tiny window, The battle space readout near his lower chest gave him a display of the battle space, as relayed from aerial and ground drones and the sensors of every soldier and vehicle in the area. Communications feeds allowed him to connect to and read data from hundreds of cameras if need be, all in motion, all the time. So yeah, this is the Rhino. Yeah, pretty freaking gangster, dude. They have his, I don't see his nose art. Am I just missing it? Maybe that's not Kane, dude. Honor Guard? What says Honor Guard on it? Where the hell is... Is that around the right shoulder? Oh, he's zooming on that, dude. That's as much as I can zoom in? You joking my butt? I don't know. Oh well. Okay, zoom out. Yeah, so that's it for the Rhino. There's a Wolverine, there's an Armadillo. The Croc, I didn't see too much about it. There's a small mention of a Croc in one of the short stories in Flotsam of War. And it goes like this. The shape of the cockpit canopy was like looking down on the head of a crocodile, which was where it got its name from. The right arm mounted a chain gun, not the light model M242. This was the newer M300, one that could chew through an armored vehicle if it got the right angle. The left arm mounted a grenade launcher. On each shoulder was a trio of missiles. The armored combat rig was painted in ermine camouflage, grays and digital black and white splotches. Okay, so that ends our trip through the Gen 2s. This might be short. For as long as this took me to compile, I feel like this is not going to be a super long stream. Alright, Gen 3. We also have refit kits for the new tech that will allow us to do field upgrades to the older models. So yeah, like I said before, they're not just going to scrap all these usable mechs that they have, like the Gen 2s and stuff. So they decided to retrofit them so they become even more efficient and effective in the field. And keep everybody in the fight, you know? Utilize all the resources they have. In the second generation rigs, the pilot's legs were encased in armor protection. In the third generation rigs, the pilots more or less sat in the middle of the suit rather than standing as he was used to. The pilot's arms were in sensor-embedded sleeves that allowed him to control the rig's arms and hands. This complicated the use of the arms, with new finger controls being in glove-like contraptions that took practice. So yeah, obviously they're much more advanced. They're much more streamlined. It sounds like they're just getting bigger, and they're finding ways to add to power these larger suits and go bigger and bigger. And so I'm wondering if at some point down the road, as this war drags on for years and years and years, if we're going to end up having massive mechs, like some what do they call it in Pacific Rim? I don't remember. You had the kaijus. I don't remember what the rigs were called. Oh well. Anyway, that big. Pacific Rim big. The new rigs were much more advanced than the older models. Their computer and balance controls were much better, as were the internal displays. Power, which had always been a management nightmare on rigs, was less of a problem. Adam didn't care that the fuel cells were allegedly based on alien technology. He was just happy that he had more energy to work with. I should be able to hang in the battle a lot longer with this kind of juice, he thought. The third gen rigs allowed some degree of custom configuration, especially the Charger and Baboon. So yeah, I think also with the third gens, they're a little bit more set with their weaponry. They're not quite as modular as the previous two rigs or generations. But yeah, there's still some things that can be maneuvered around. It sounds like I haven't really... I think I've seen the Baboon come up in at the training facility. I don't know if I've seen any like actually be mentioned in actual combat. But yeah, Charger. That's the only time I've heard of Charger. Gen 3 Mongoose, Gen 3 Baboon. Oh, I guess I did write it down. Charger. Oh, that's what I wrote down right there. Bet. Grizzly. This is Kane's rig. The Grizzly packed a lot of power. On her left arm, it mounted a new MD-01X direct energy weapon, or DEW. It had a short range. But the microwave burst would cripple a human. According to the army, they were highly effective against the aliens. Yeah, so there's this whole thing with the aliens. It's not really ASHUR related, I guess, but I don't know. There's weird like radio waves seem to hurt them, and there was a little teaser in the last book about maybe gamma radiation, not liking that. And they also don't like heat. So, and I feel like the heat thing was kind of like after we figured out it was a weakness, it was immediately deployed into our combat tactics, and then it hasn't. The last few books haven't really mentioned anything about the heat. They've been looking for like chemical solutions, like things that will react violently with the fish's biology. And so that's kind of been something they've been more focusing on. But I haven't really noticed a whole lot of flamethrower, Molotov, grenade, whatever talk. I mean, there's like thermobaric bombs and grenades and stuff that do get mentioned. And obviously he doesn't need to keep harping on the same things because he's moving the story along to show other avenues and everything else that's going on. So he doesn't need to keep harping on the whole heat thing. And anyway, I'm sure they'd probably find some kind of way to, the fish at least, to work around that weakness. Was this what the fish like adapt faster than we adapt? It's like a constant thing that keeps happening, which keeps pushing things into crazier and crazier situations. But yeah, like I said, the last thing they teased was gamma radiation, and I don't know much about gamma other than it's what made the Hulk. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know what kind of crazy shit they're going to make with that. Okay. On the underside of the rig's left arm was a menacing tube that jutted out near his wrist, housing the M10A flamethrower. While it had only 4 shots and the range was relatively short, he was more worried about the fuel he carried. Yeah, so they were like super nervous about carrying flamethrowers into battle in their rigs, because if it gets ruptured, I mean, seems pretty obvious what could happen with napalm fuel or whatever it is. But it is what it is. They don't really mention it, like I said, too much later after this. A few more books will kind of touch on that kind of stuff, but for the most part, they kind of stop talking about the heat and the fire, whatever, as being a weakness. But this is basically right after they kind of figured it out. More Grizzly. His right arm mounted a new, lighter Remington M3 railgun with a 15-round magazine. It was more like a sniper rifle with a new targeting system with an advanced zoom capability. In his torso, just below the cockpit, was a stubby 40mm grenade launcher. It was deadly accurate with a small magazine, but useful in the right conditions. The right hand pinky finger was rigid and had a high-speed cutter. A carbon bit chainsaw of sorts, only far more dangerous. When powered up, it could inflict a lot of damage. In demonstrating the cutter, the drill instructors used it to slice through a 2x4 in a heartbeat. The demonstration of it against a piece of ASHUR armor showed it was just as effective. Yeah, I think it was in Riptides, they, especially from Adam Kane's, because I mean he was the POV we saw the most, but like it's assumed that he wasn't the only one that ended up actually like straight up boxing the aliens and going hand to hand. And so that was when he had the Gen 2 rigs. So when the Gen 3 rigs came out and they started getting this field intel, they were like, we are seeing that there's actually quite a bit of close-up, hand-to-hand combat taking place, and we need an effective weapon. So they basically put these like diamond-tipped chain swords built into like the forearms or whatever of some of these rigs, and they are dope. There's like one scene where this ASHUR like puts it on this boss's neck and like chops its head off and then holds it up for the cameras. That's dope, dude. Okay. The gorilla. So I haven't actually seen these, I don't think, in the field or any pilots or in the training or anything. The only time I feel like I saw them mentioned was the first time, they're the first Gen 3s we see, and they're like in a factory, and like the colonel's coming down to take a look at them, and that's about it. That's all I remember really seeing about the gorillas. Stepping back, he surveyed the entirety of the gorilla, still stunned by its size. She's too big for us indoors. She's too big for use indoors, that's for sure. And then the guy goes on to say, like, that's why you would use like a smaller like mamba rig or mongoose or something. We've added to the armor in the torso and an additional layer of shielding on the hydraulics. We've also added a thin, lightweight layer of carbon mesh that should reduce penetration. The paint that these will get is resistant to the aliens' acid spraying weapons. So you can see they're like incorporating technology specifically geared towards fighting the aliens rather than fighting Russians. Its speed, which is what the Gen 2s were designed to fight Russians. So like while they were effective against the fish, they weren't designed to fight the fish, whereas the Gen 3s and the Tridents are built with the fish in mind. The tridents are the underwater rigs, which I have not got to yet. Its speed is almost the same. We clocked it at 16 miles per hour with the additional mass. Anything you hit when you're moving that fast is definitely going to feel it. So yeah, this big-ass gorilla mech suit can run 16 miles per hour. We've improved the cockpit. It's a little more snug, but has a new targeting and guidance system. Yeah, that's all I could find on the old... So they mentioned Rhino. I don't actually know if it was referring to a Gen 3 rig or not. I didn't really specify it. It was in a section where they were talking about Gen 3 rigs. So I don't know if there actually is a Gen 3 Rhino or what. But it was there, so I popped it there. The Bronco, this is from short stories. I believe the only time I've seen a Bronco, well, maybe not. It was a light rig, but unlike a lot of light rigs, this one wasn't built for speed. The armor plating covered a layer of sheer thickening fluid, a gel that was soft and gave the ASHUR flexibility. But when it was hit, hardened instantly into another layer of protection. With its medium weight L2 and a 2.5 laser and an M2 railgun, it packed a solid punch. She didn't just like it for the power and protection though. The Bronco had a look to it, stern lines like a rearing horse. The armored plates had a curve that, in profile, made it look like a well-muscled wild horse near the front. Even its legs used rounded edges that seemed to mimic muscles. The Elk. Larger than the older rigs, cleaner lines with an intimidating weapon mounted on its shoulder right down to the stylized flames painted on the barrel. The Mustang. This was a guy, I think it was like a junior officer that was going through the final test on the Gen 3s with Kane. And it basically, even though he was a superior officer, Kane had way more knowledge and he was kind of taking Kane's lead in this test. Weddle was piloting a new Mustang, faster and more agile than its Grizzly. It mounted a new prototype sonic weapon in its right arm, a chain gun in the left arm, and a light laser on its long, narrow head. It also had an electrical shock defense system if anyone dared to get close enough to touch it. I feel like I haven't noticed that on... maybe I haven't seen any Mustangs actually in combat, because that sounds dope. Because the aliens, although this isn't about the aliens, but the aliens come out with this whip. Now that they've seen that we have these mechs, the aliens invented this like electrical whip, and they wrap it around and they send electrical current and shut down the mechs, and then just destroy it while it's disabled. The bull moose. The bull moose is huge, really big. I haven't seen too much about it other than Colonel Davis, old Harpoon. That's what he pilots it. When he's after the war or the battle at the Pentagon, he went to the the ASHUR training program, and he's an instructor there. I think he's the lead instructor, and that's what he pilots for tests and stuff. There's a rattlesnake, the copperhead, a menacing assault rig that made Adam's Grizzly look like a toy. Oh, apparently it's fucking huge. All right. Let's get on down to the Tridents. These are our underwater rigs that let us take the fight to the fish, boy. Oh, what's up? I got 2 viewers there. Sorry, guys. I was too busy reading. Didn't even look at my chat. I know no one's chatting, but people are looking. Hello. All right, so Tridents. The suits were larger by almost half than the Army and Marine Corps ASHUR rigs. So, yeah, they're big. They have to be able to withstand a lot of water pressure, so kind of the reason. And also they're underwater, so the weight, works a little differently. Formal name of Deep Sea Warfare Initiative, codenamed Trident. It was the brainchild of USN Commander, now Captain. That's not part of the text. I put that in there because he gets promoted later down in a later story. Kent Warner and a friend of his who was a Navy SEAL team leader. The concept was to drop a SEAL team in deep water, miles offshore, wearing special suits designed for deep water operations. They could walk or propel into a harbor undetected in order to attack ships or execute covert operations. So Trident was actually started, the concept of it, the plan to make these suits was made before, or was created before the aliens attacked. And basically, after the invasion starts, he gets repurposed, his team gets heavily expanded, and his funding goes through the roof. His program goes from like a little niche, like, okay, whatever, yeah, do your thing, it'll be cool if we can get it, to like a priority for the Department of Defense and the U.S. government. So, and he's a cool character. He's a good guy. He's not like a D-bag. There are definitely D-bag characters, and I really like Kent Warner. He's just a straight-up Navy engineer. They had been the key had been the design of the Special Combination Combat Diving Suit. Coming up with a deep water suit that could survive the extreme pressures and still be mobile with offensive capability was a daunting task. If he had tried to do it using typical design and testing techniques, it could take 3 years to reach even the start of creating the test gear and models. Kent had proposed something more radical, going right from concept to prototyping and testing components. The Navy had tried the concept before, more than once, and failed spectacularly each time. Kent had looked into the failed programs and believed that he had figured out the root problem. They had never really started from scratch. The other teams had tried to apply ages-old government processes to something that needed, to his thinking, more of an organic approach to rapid design. Previous failures were the victims of too damn much Fed Gov thinking. Yeah, dude, being for I could see the bureaucracy slowing shit down. That's what's cool about him is he kind of throws all that out the window and it takes a way less bureaucratic approach to getting this done, which is why he's so successful and why they put him in charge of the program. They had become bogged down with pointless administrivia overhead, project plans, and teams whose entire job was to chart and plot progress that wasn't happening. So Warner didn't allow the rulebooks anywhere near his pet project. He stole ideas from the Army's own ASHUR program for surface tactical combat rigs and from commercial industry. A lot of the engineering had already been done for a wide range of other projects, some dating back decades. He raided the archives for ideas and concepts that he could leverage. He kept his team small, a choice aided by lack of any real budget. Everyone on the project was not just a leader, but a contributor. They were expected to roll up their sleeves and do some of the actual heavy lifting when necessary. In 6 months, he had his first suit ready. As expected, there were 100-plus problems after an unmanned test drive. On a typical FedGov program, it would have taken a year or two to work through the issues. In 4 months, they were testing V2 of the suit. Now they were down to 14 problems. Now hanging on the rack in front of him was the Trident V3. In 4 days, it would undergo an unmanned test. Yes, it had an odd welded-on makeshift fixes. It was far from sleek and streamlined, but development was fast and way under budget. So that is still pre-fish. Combined with the Army and Marine Corps ASHUR 3 development, this means this is dialogue. This is I don't know, it's like a general or somebody comes up to him and tells him that he is now going to be getting a bunch of funding and a way bigger team and having to work with other branches. This means we're going to be sharing facilities with them at a newer center being set up now. We can ill afford to have 2 combat rig programs that are not working hand in hand. They need your rapid development approach, and we need to tap some of the innovations they are developing for the ASHUR systems. At the same time, the Army wants to see how you got to a working prototype so quickly with Trident. This is more dialogue. You'll need to change some of your thinking in terms of design. The V3 was built around specific mission parameters from the SEALs. The terms and conditions of this war changed those parameters. You didn't build this for combat underwater with an enemy that is native to those conditions. Very, very true. All right, so the Volturnus. One of the issues they found with the underwater rigs is getting them to wherever it is they actually were going to fight, because the ocean's freaking huge. So they didn't want to deploy them from the shore or drop them from a surface ship. So the Volturnus is like this underwater module that is I don't know, dude. It's like a shield carrier, those from the Avengers, but it's just underwater only, and it can hold multiple rigs and people and a crew inside, and I think it even holds the new fighter submarines. Excuse me. The descent module was something the team had devised as a separate project nearly 3 months before. It was a DC submersible. Attached to its exterior would be the Trident suits and the Gorgon attack subs. So yeah, the subs are attached to it. The descent module was a base of sorts, designed to allow an attack force to drop near the enemy location without having to waste the precious power of the individual mini-subs and suits. The suits' access was through a tight hatch on the rear shoulders of the suits, which was where they attached to the Volturnus. We don't see the Trident V3, it's basically just a jumping off point. It's never, as far as I've seen in the 8 books so far, I haven't seen a Trident V3 because they've moved on to all the rigs are named after sea life. Sorry. So the Trident V3, the suit was larger than the Army's ASHUR rigs. It had more curves for easier underwater navigation. Propulsion thrusters were rigged on the shoulders. Its fuel cells and batteries were 3 times the size of those of an Army suit. In many respects, it was more of a mini submarine than a powered tactical rig. So just don't worry about that. The tiger shark. This is kind of like I said, I do believe it's on the cover of Storm Surge, and I think it was the first Trident that was deployed, and it's the suit that was, I can't remember the guy's name that piloted it, but it went inside the alien base underwater and rescued POWs from the aliens, including Natalia Falto. And it was a tiger shark. So anyway, the huge combat suit had smooth contours. We don't have the luxury that the ASHUR design teams do. Our surfaces are affected by water, not attached. The rounded surfaces of the rig were streamlined, acting almost like a rudder in the water. The tiger shark was designed to be able to walk on the ocean floor, but its primary movement was via thrusters on the shoulders and hips. The diver would lean the suit forward, and the thrusters would carry it forward, with the upper body and head leaning into the direction of motion. Carbon weave material that covered the suit in a dull gray shimmer, embedded by a special baking process to the exterior. The glossy gray material was an armor system, and it deadened sonar signals, absorbing them. So that kind of they didn't know like what, sonar radar capabilities that the aliens had, the fish have. So they just did that just in case it allowed them to have a higher degree of stealth and concealment. They were smaller than her moray, had an almost anime armored suit look to them in her mind. The tiger sharks were the first official tridents and could be configured with a number of different underwater weapons. While they might have looked sleeker than her moray. The Great White, this is a big boy. The Great White was the largest of the underwater suits they had designed. It was designed for the driver to walk along the floor with assistance from the thruster units. Bigger, it carried more of the new weapons, essentially a two-man mobile firing platform. It was the only two-man rig in the U.S. arsenal, larger than even the new Army rigs. The Great White looked... the Gen 3s. The Great White looked the least humanoid of the Tridents. It had a forward arcing back, and the gunner rested in the snout of the shark-like maw, looking out what would be an open jaw. The engineers had gone so far as to paint teeth around the armored viewport to make it look more like a shark. The pilot stood below the gunner with a smaller window. With its streamlined form, it looked like a massive walking shark. True to its name, it required coordination between the gunner and the pilot on a level never before tried. So that's cool. Swordfish, the stonefish. The dull gray with streaked white and black highlights on the stonefish were similar to those on her moray. God, I can't say that word, dude. Both had a humanoid shape. The stonefish was bulkier, thicker, more ominous looking, with micro torpedo racks on both shoulders. It had a 6-round spear gun launcher on top of the right forearm. It had maneuvering thrusters on the underside of both arms as well. Hammerhead, I don't know if we might see it. Like I said, I'm only on book 5. There's 8 books, so I haven't finished compiling all the info in this. Barracuda, a hammerhead Barracuda. The Barracuda was larger than a more traditional ASHUR rig, but with smoother, sleeker contours. In the Barracuda, the pilot sat lower than in the Army's counterparts. Mako. So the Mako, I think it's the Mako. That's piloted by Chief Langman, Victor Langman. He's in book 7 and book 8. In book 7, he basically carries a nuke to a fish settlement, city, whatever. He puts it, blows it, kills it, blows them all up. And spoilers, by the way. And they retaliate by causing a massive tsunami that wipes out like the whole West Coast and several other parts of the world. So, yeah. The moray. The moray was one of the smaller underwater suits and the most human in appearance. Its contours were smooth but formed a fine ridge on the leading edges of the suit. These had the effect of reducing drag while at the same time acting like rudders on the arms, legs, and torso. The moray was sleeker, a little squatter. It had thrusters worn like a backpack and on the shins. Anaconda. Okay, so that's it for the tridents. So the Frankenrig is basically these techs, these ASHUR techs, are in a working at a base that sees a lot of action, and they get a lot of damaged, scrapped ASHUR parts. And basically, in their downtime to blow off steam, they've literally been building a Frankenrig, right? An ASHUR built from all different kinds of rigs that have been jerry-rigged and welded and, eyeballed together. It's pretty dope. It's from a short story in Flotsam of War. and it's one of my more favorite stories out of that book. Really, really good. But I'll just read this little section from it. At one point in its life, it had been a battle ram ASHUR rig. Combat. Did I forget to put ram? Ram's one. Yeah, no, I did. Okay. At one point in its life, it had been a battle ram ASHUR rig. Combat damage had rendered it pure salvage, and the good stuff had been removed from it. The techs had talked about scrapping the frame. It had been bent and burned in battle, but Felch had kept it. In the off hours, he had repaired it, manufacturing his own replacement parts. All of the techs contributed to the side project. It was technical therapy and helped them cope with the tension and tedium. The legs were cobbled together from 7 different rigs, battle refuse. While symmetrical, they didn't look like a battle ram's, but more like a king snake's. I think I forgot to add that. King snake, that's another one, I guess. Though these were custom built, its weapon systems were also built from salvage that didn't meet the Army standards, but that he and a few of the other techs had pieced back together. The Hulking shoulder-mounted railgun had a custom frame and coil system that E3 Carter had built almost from scratch. Getting it to tie into the targeting system had been tricky, taking some reprogramming on the part of Corporal Martin, a genius at the coding. The heavy ACR had been built from the parts of 3 damaged guns. Its flamethrowers were built almost entirely from scratch except for the igniter assembly, the work of Private Kuhn's sweat equity in the project. Parts of it were downright ingenious, such as the way he added an armor wrap around the flammable fuel tank slung under the arm where it was mounted. The battery pack was a second-generation one. Batteries were always at a premium in the repair bay. It was bigger and bulkier than the Gen 3 rigs, but it was the best they could muster. They had to modify the frame to inset the battery so as to not throw off the center of gravity. Where engineers used complex calculations to determine this, the technicians did it more on instinct and feel. They had gotten it right. The hodgepodge ASHUR handled well in its test runs. The parts on their little project were scrap. The hydraulic fluid was used, drained out of real ASHUR rigs that needed repair. The soft armor, the shear thickening fluid, a precious commodity now that the war was on, had been salvaged from rigs that had been scrapped. Army regulations said not to use the material, but throwing it away made no sense to Fletch and the other techs. Yeah, dude. That story, he ends up, so all the ASHUR rigs at the base, they get drawn off to another battle, and so it's like techs and, I don't know, so other support staff or whatever that are still at the base during this battle, but like a force of aliens comes and attacks the base directly while like the main fighting force is gone. So like all the mechanics and stuff have to like rally a defense, and the only rig they have is this Franken rig. So he hops in this Franken rig, and he's not a qualified pilot, but it's all they have, and they've piloted it around to like test it, basically like walk it around a little bit here and there. So he gets in this thing and takes it out there and starts fighting it. And I do believe so in the newer books they are starting to enlist militia members into like a specific militia ASHUR program where they go to the ASHUR training school, but they don't train with regular military members. They have their own instructors and off to the side. It's a different program, probably not quite as intense, still intense, but not quite as intense. And I think it's these rigs, because the Army liked this idea, and they're like, holy crap, we need to be doing this. We could be having extra rigs out there assembled from spare parts. So they take this, I think that it's not just like old ASHURs, but like the militia are actually using the Franken rigs. I do believe. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. So I haven't got to the next, I mean, I read it already, but like I haven't gone back through to skim and verify all the information. I don't remember what the Brits call their mechs. I want to say one of the models is called a Spitfire. I think that's the main, like the commander's rig. I don't remember what they called them though, and it's driving me crazy. Another one that I haven't had a chance to put in here, but I do remember seeing it, is the Vatican has their own mechs, and they're doing their shit up painted with like a Crusader paint job. Like they have like a red cross and they're painted white. I would read a whole book about Templar mechs. Hell yes. There's an offshoot ASHUR. It's in book 5, Ratchet's Run. There's like this private security company that basically takes a job from a rap star to go into Beverly Hills, which is under the control of the aliens, and go into a bank and get something out of her vault. And they go and buy this mech from a company who built a bunch of mechs because they were going to put in a bid with the U.S. government to build them. And I think I can't remember what happened exactly, but basically they built all these mechs and they didn't end up getting the contract. So these mechs just kind of sat around. And so people like this, that have this like private security company, picked it up, and they got a. I can't remember if she's washed out or if she just got medically separated from the military, but she's got a chip on her shoulder because she can, she still feels like she can do it, and she does. She gets in this rig and goes and works with this company. But anyway, I don't remember what that's called because didn't get that far yet in this book as I was going back through. But yeah, there is like another that suits there. Anyway, Japan, they have one called the Samurai, and that's basically, I'll just read this. Japan had favored larger numbers of drones than most militaries, and rather than support a mix of battle armor, the Japanese self-defense forces relied on one model, the Samurai. Fast-moving, lightly armored, the suits packed substantial firepower. I don't think there's any art available for the Samurai yet. Hopefully someday we see it. That'd be pretty dope. But no, that's all I've seen so far. Russia. So we see 2 Russian mechs, and that's in the first book at Guam during training in Falto's POV. So the first one is a grizzly. So we have a grizzly, and also the Russians have a grizzly. Suddenly, she came clear and saw it. Towering almost 3 yards tall, it was a battle-armored suit. Not just any suit. She identified it quickly. A Russian Grizzly-class armored combat suit. The wearer's feet stood at the knee joints on the thick pile driver-like legs. The suit was boxy, with sharp edges defining the armored torso. Its arms had actuators just behind, allowing the operator to move them easily. Falto had come up on its side. She saw that it was just opening up with a chain gun slung over its left arm, under its left arm. For a moment, the firing didn't sound simulated as the weapon tore through the dummy ammo. And this is dialogue from Sergeant Rickenberg, where he's basically describing the stats of the Grizzly. This is the Russian GR-17 Grizzly Bear. They're a very rough equivalent of our ASHUR second-generation Rhino rig. She's a monster in a firefight, as you have all just learned. She ain't the biggest bitch in their arsenal, but she's the one you are most likely to fight. This beastie is equipped with a Glagolev Shipunov Gryazev Model 20 gas-powered minigun, capable of firing 6,250 rounds per minute. Of course, 5 of you already know that since I mowed you down with that purring monstrosity. She has a flamethrower, 2 AK-27s, and can mount up to 6 RPGs and shoulder racks when fully configured. Dude, I think the Mammoth sounds freaking sweet. Mammoth had a driver and a gunner, kind of like the Great White, but on ground. With the gunner mounted higher and to the rear, almost a cross between a tank and an ASHUR 2 Rhino-class rig. It moved on 4 legs, with the back 2 legs being huge. The Russians built her to be dominating, but Natalia remembered studying it. They were slow beasts, ponderous. Its armor was typical Russian, sharp edges, nothing but utilitarian use. They didn't use adaptive camouflage, so this Mammoth was painted with jungle patterns, as if you could hide something almost twice the size of an ASHUR 2 suit. The Mammoth trio of chain guns roared. Big bitch, dude. A little bit of German. I think this is from Storm Surge. Just a little tiny blurb. It's like in between like the sections of the book. They call them like cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3. Usually there's like basically part 1, part 2, part 3. Those have like 2 to 3 little short story, like really short little stories in them in between the chapters. And this is from that. The Deutsche Marine had been developing the Unterwasserkampfzug for several years, but there had been little use for them other than undersea rescue and salvage. I do like you can see a lot of the stuff that they're using wasn't designed for this. Like this is literally designed for salvage. So they're taking like, utility vehicles down to go fight aliens. Outfitting the Deutsche Marine's existing suits with weapons had been difficult, but the engineering team had proven up to the challenge. Those German engineers. They had modified an underwater plasma cutter designed for salvage work, extending its range. Very Dead Space. Each of the Amberst class suits was equipped with 6 micro torpedoes, 2 of which had plasma warheads that burned whatever they hit. And the suits already had powerful claws for recovery work, which would be useful if the fighting was in close quarters. Retooling the suits for combat had made them heavier, requiring more power and more sophisticated propulsion units. India, we do see some India fighting, dude, called the Ratha. Koda shifted his Ratha to the side, out from behind its protector position. He shunted power to his large shoulder-mounted laser in targeting mode and armed the 8 missiles and launchers on both sides of his Ratha's head. In Spain, they don't have their own. These are German-made. Seaman augmented battle suits, Kampf Class 1 German made. That's all I got for you. All right. We're getting close to the end here, guys. So notable pilots. There are more. I didn't finish them all. Some I debated on whether to put them in or not. Basically, my criteria was either he had to be a POV character or at least come in more than one book. There was one character that was in 2 books, but she was very minuscule, barely had any dialogue. And I was like, like she had her call sign, she had her rig name. I was like, that's why I wanted to put her in there. But I was like, she doesn't really do, like, I don't know. Anyway, like I said, there are ones I'm going to put in here, but I didn't get that far. So the man himself, U.S. Oh, never mind. It's not. I mean, he is cool, but spoiler, plug your ears if you want to hear it. Dies in book 1. USMC Staff Sergeant Andrew Hannibal Rickenberg, dual-qualled ASHUR pilot, pilots an ASHUR 2 Lion class rig, fought in Alaska and Korea. Died. Oh, I guess I put it here. Died in the initial assault on Guam. Insignia is the Staff Sergeant's Lion class rig. Insignia is the Lion. I hadn't got my groove down yet. The Staff Sergeant's Lion class rig was adorned with a bulldog, standing on its hind legs, firing a chain gun, spewing empty casings, with the words "Devil Dog" in bright red above it. Yeah, so his rig is called Devil Dog. U.S. Army Master Sergeant Adam Brass Balls Kane. The boy, dude, the man, the myth, the legend, qualled in 4 different rigs, spanning all 3 generations. His insignia, a buxom babe wearing a scanty red swimsuit, sat astride a laser barrel from a rhino rig. It was just on the borderline of appropriate, with a hint of a nipple shadow adding to her enticement. Underneath was the name of his rig, Jumpin' Jules. Every time he saw the image, he smiled. He had used his wife's face and memories of her physique when he had Zim arrange for a talented private in the equestrian stables to paint the art. United States Army Colonel Sean Davis, Harpoon is his call sign. He pilots currently I think he had Cobra in a Gen 2 Cobra in book 2, Riptide. But now, since the Gen 3s came out, he's in a Bull Moose. Pilots a Gen 3 Bull Moose at ASHUR Training School, fought with Adam Kane at the Battle for the Pentagon, and put him in for the Medal of Honor and recommended him for Gen 3 ASHUR training. United States Army Sergeant Ringo Beetle McRoy. He's not a huge character. He's just had a good amount of dialogue and combat where you see him a lot. Not from his POV, but from someone in his squad's POV. So I put him in there. USA Sergeant Ringo Beetle McRoy pilots Fluffy Death, Sergeant's Mamba class ASHUR rig. It bore the torso painting of a ferocious pit bull wearing a Boston Red Sox shirt. Nobody knows what it means or what the relevance is, but maybe other ASHUR pilots, but nobody in his squad knows. This one I put in here just because this is basically an Easter egg. So U.S. Army Warrant Officer Steve Boomer Korea. Korea was cocky, which was saying a lot for an ASHUR pilot. Pilot's a grizzly. So this is basically a shout-out Easter egg to Blaine Pardo's friend and fellow author Larry Korea. Steve might be a shout-out to Steve Diamond because Steve and Larry have a podcast together called The Writer's Dojo. So I don't know if that is. I know for sure, obviously, Korea, because Eric, I can't remember his last name. It's totally Eric Crew in the Discord chat who works for Creative Juggernaut did verify that is in fact in reference to Larry Korea. I do wonder if the Steve is for Steve Diamond. I just thought of that right now. And then this is currently where I'm at. I'm on book 5, and this is where U.S. Army Lieutenant Sutherland McLeod is. He's in Ratchet's Run, and he says Steel Hyena. I don't know if that's his call sign or if that's the rig. I'm not sure. I literally just got to his chapter, and I ran out of time, and I had to come out and start the stream. So, yeah, that's the notable pilots I've added so far. There's another one, and Bianca Cordova, call sign Blackjack. She comes in book 7, and she's in book 7, book 8. But I haven't got that far yet to throw her in there. She piloted a Hornet, which is a Gen 3 rig in book 7, and then stuff happens, and in book 8, she gets requalled on the, oh shit, what is it, dude? Is it a Ram? It's like she gets on a Wolverine, I think is what it is. It's a long range, like it's basically got two massive rail. Kind of reminds me of the mech from Helldivers 2, like the second mech you can get that has like basically the 2 rail guns. Yeah, that's what it reminds me of. Or those are auto cannons, but like that, whatever. Anyway, and then I just threw this in there because I was like, I mean, ASHURs, right? Technicians. Being a mechanic myself, having a lot of being in the Navy and having a lot of like mech friends and stuff. I was an air crewman, so I was actually on the plane. I wasn't a pilot, but I was on the plane. But had you work close with your mechs, right? So I had to put these guys in there. So ASHUR technicians. Not everyone could be a tech privileged to work on ASHURs. The training program was rigorous and required a lot of different disciplines. From welding to weapons was a line often used to describe the program. You were usually trained on 3 or more rig types. You also got to pilot rigs as well, mostly so that you could do the work on them. That was the part he liked. The raw power of being in a cockpit and moving one of the war machines around the repair bay. Techs got to do things that other soldiers only dreamed of in that respect. And yeah, that's all I got for tonight. No one's on the chat no more. No one's watching. Bummer. Let's go back here. But yeah, if you did come in and you watched, well, thanks for coming by. And if you are watching this after the fact, then thanks for watching. And please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And hopefully next week I will be talking to Eric Crew. I'll reach out to him and see if he wants to hop on here. And he will be the first ever guest I've had on my YouTube channel. And I hope down the road to get maybe if Blaine wants to hop on, that'd be great. If Brent wants to hop on. I already forgot the last gentleman's name. Forgive me if you end up watching this. But yeah, I would like, I mean, you're an engineer. That sounds pretty dope. So yeah, I had fun. I didn't know how I was going to go, just me sitting there reading, but I liked it. I had a good time. So I hope you guys did too, and I'll see you guys later. Put you on the old ending soon show.